All right, Mark, we are live. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our third Thursday. So I guess that makes this the sixth Thursday. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Paul Gray, the Secretary Treasurer of the Schooner Association. Just a couple of logistical notes before we get into the webinar. Everybody's microphones are currently muted. It just makes it much easier to deal with background noise. You can unmute them, but I will ask that you wait until we get to the Q&A session. The way we're going to do this tonight, which worked out pretty well last month, was just obviously this short agenda here, introduction here. Mark will be taking about 45 minutes for his presentation, and then we'll have about a 15-minute Q&A. So just a little bit about tonight's presentation. Our presenter tonight is Mark Hall, a member from Oceano, California. Mark will share his 18-month experience rebuilding and re-rigging Delvento, a Tom Colvin Tamarack schooner. Mark retired in 2011 after serving 35 years as an Episcopal priest and Air Force chaplain. So Delvento is basically for a never-ending retirement project. So basically, after 18 months in the hard, gutting and rebuilding the vessel, she was launched in December of 2012. And with that, I will let Mark pick up from there, and I will stop sharing my screen. And Mark, it's all yours.
Well, good evening, people. If I can figure this out, we'll be in business here. There we go. Yeah, this is a picture from the Great American Schooner Race in San Francisco Bay, and I think this was late in 2016. And I had this was actually the first time that we had all those sails up on the boat. And the schooner in the background that you can see right here, that's the schooner Martha that's out of Port Townsend, but originally was built in San Francisco Bay as a flagship for the San Francisco Yacht Club in 1907. And that, of course, it was a gaff schooner before it was re-rigged as in its current rigging. I got sailing early because my dad was a sailor. And so I went to the Coast Guard Academy, and here's the Coast Guard Academy Eagle. And so I had a chance to be cadet officer of the deck and both tack ship and wear ship, and I don't think that many people do that these days, but hopefully more people get an opportunity. It is it's a fun experience, and I did it with a boat crew, so we only had about 15 people tacking that ship, and that takes a while. Anyway, while I was at the academy, I also sailed, and I mentioned it I think the last seminar. This is the Terragram, which was an Alden schooner, 58-foot on deck. And we sailed that as part of the yacht squadron at the Coast Guard Academy. Unfortunately, this boat and all the other wooden and one fiberglass boat were all sold to replace with the Academy 44s. And so all these old boats, this boat actually was sold to somebody, and he apparently cut the rig down a little bit, tried to sail across the Atlantic, and it sank. So boat maintenance is a very important thing. Oops, how come I'm there? So here's the Delvento. I found it up in near Vancouver, Canada, and this is where it was sitting on the hard. Ed Bray, who his son is a naval architect. Ed was a pilot for Canadian Air. He built this boat. He had it built by Greenwich Marine in British Columbia in 75. And after it was built, he finished it. He and his son built in all the wood on it. It's built out of 1/4-inch aluminum, everything. The decks, the bottom, the cabins, the doors are obviously not aluminum, but everything else is aluminum. And you'll note there's no propeller on it, but it's an offset prop on the starboard side. The boat had been sailed around the Pacific and back up to British Columbia and then back down to the Sea of Cortez, and Ed lived on it for 17 years down there. He had some health issues and he trucked it back to British Columbia, and he had it in the water for a while, but it actually went back on the hard in 99. So excuse me, 2001. So when I actually first saw the boat, it had been in this position for 9 years. It was a typical boat that had, from that age, lots of diesel fuel spilled in it from its diesel stove. And it had obviously been de-rigged. So here's the boat when it showed up in Stockton, California. I wisely, as you'll see in my rest of my presentation, decided not to sail it down because I got the boat, painted the bottom, took out the old Saab diesel engine, which I love these engines, and many of you some of you may have one of these engines. However, at 10 horsepower and difficulty finding parts, I decided to remove it. So when I put the boat in the water and put the masts in, there was no engine in it. And I also unfortunately had taken the bilge pump out because I figured aluminum boats don't leak. And after coming back, after launching it 2 weeks later, I came back from a clergy conference and found the water up on the bilge to the floorboards. So this necessitated hauling the boat out again. And so this is pulling out the chains and looking at the bilge. This is the chain locker. And you'll see that it doesn't look so good. And then when I went aft in it and decided I had to take the ballast out because the leaking seemed to be coming from underneath the concrete that the ballast been poured in. And you can see that that's not such good shape. That's the forward part starting to take apart, and that's the inside when I took out the concrete. And you can see that the problem is the concrete was poured not only on the keel, but also over the hull plates. And some of the holes in the hull were actually under that part where the concrete had been poured over. And I suspect, although I have no proof, that the holes came about because in those 9 years on the hard in British Columbia with the hot and cold and the concrete and the aluminum expanding and contracting at slightly different rates, it basically just broke down the epoxy paint barrier coat that was in there. So that by the time I got through, you can see right here that that's one hole right next to this through hull that was for the engine intake through hull. Well, when I found that hole, and then I found some other evidences of corrosion in the forward plate, that's when I decided that basically everything had to go on the inside of the boat to guarantee it. And you'll see here's a good example of the concrete chunks of lead embedded in concrete. So this is when you think that somebody would have thought about this, what was going to happen to this boat in 40 years. And you'll see I fixed that. Also notice that the paint here, this is all just, that was concrete on top of it, but all the paint is basically gone. It's terribly discolored, you can't quite tell. I used a hydraulic, right here, a jackhammer, hydraulic hammer. I went through 2 of these, by the way, and about 10 of these bits to chisel out all the concrete and get these chunks of lead out of the boat. And this is this is the foremast. And you'll see this is built up over the foremast and welded on, and then there's a box keel here the lead was in. And they had put lead underneath there and poured concrete under it. So I was taking this piece out literally piece by piece in order to get this piece out. And then I had to cut a hole in this floor here to chisel through to get this piece out. So professionally, I do believe in miracles, but after I got this out, I definitely had proof that that was the answer to the prayer there. So you can see that it's starting to look pretty rough, but this is the last little bit I got out. And I just noticed the crowbars and the sledgehammer, things I don't normally associate because all the other boats I've worked on were wood, mostly my dad's Meadowlark and the Terragram. So that's that part. Okay, here's the boat that has finally got all cleared out. And you will see that there's a light back there just to show him where that hole is. But here's the part that really I began to understand. And this is for other people doing restorations. These are the limber holes that theoretically when the chain is put in, if there's any water, it's going to drain back to the sump underneath the main mast so that the bilge would not stay wet. But because they poured concrete in there, all that water settled in and actually soaked in around the concrete in that first compartment after the chain locker. And that was the most corrosion was back in that compartment. And so then I thought I have these water tanks. I noticed a leak out of this tank into the boat. And so I decided these were enclosed and welded right into the hull. So when I opened that up, I began to see if there was corrosion inside those. And you'll notice, and this would be the port side one. There's about 2 gallons of this corrosion coming out of these tanks because there'd been no anodes put in there to prevent that. Here is that compartment right there that's just close up of the hull. That was the part that was so honeycombed. It wasn't actually broken through, but it was so thinned out that I just cut that big of a section out of the hull and then used a piece of this plate, which is the same 1/4-inch aluminum, and we welded that into that hole. And that's the picture from the outside where that was put in. So here's not quite the extension of the tear out, but that's just an indication. And this is where the head was here, and that was it had no holding tank in this boat. So this was the fitting. You can see these amazing fittings they put. That's a welded in aluminum fitting, and then this is the bronze bolted on top. But in taking this out, there's another hole right over here where the arrow is. And then on the other side, when I started messing with the what do they call transducers for the depth mount, I just touched this one and it fell out. So I got the boat out in time before had bigger holes in it. So at this point, I decided that everything had to go. And this was all foamed in here. So the foam has been removed. And the time you get in there with a needler and just knock the hell out, I was actually looking for holes. So this one came loose. I had one more hole on the port side, and then the one aft, one inside the water tank. So all that stuff there. So that at this point, I just took everything out of the boat. So here's all the stuff out of the boat. Now, once I finished totally needling it, I found not every part of the boat was like this, but you can see the pitting in it. That aluminum doesn't sheet corrode; it corrodes in spots. This is something I could not find any writing on, and some of you may be able to help me out. But I could not find any data on what to do to get all the corrosion out of all these pittings, because even at trying, I couldn't. So my solution was, after experimenting with some of the other aluminum I had that's left over from cutting out tanks, is I put straight epoxy on it. So I had just a 2-to-1 epoxy. And what it did was it soaked into all those holes and floated the corrosion out. So as a result, I ended up painting the entire inside of the boat that had been exposed and needled, and did that. And then you can see over here, this is allophane, which is an aluminum-based primer. And one of the instructions is wear gloves. If you get it on your hands, it won't come off for weeks. And I can guarantee that. I still have clothes with some of this on it. And then this is a 1-part epoxy paint, and this is I think 3 coats of that on there. So I hope you can appreciate that's a little bit better than it was before. This is looking at in the aft, this is the engine compartment right here. This is the passage that goes back aft. This is the refoaming of all the boat, and so everything except this one little painted section in the middle is all foamed. So it's about 3.5 inches of foam all over the boat, which makes it very quiet and insulates it. So here's again the aft compartment, the aft cabin there. Now I had all these chunks of lead and all those pieces that I dug out of the boat. So this is my solution for that. Not OSHA approved, I can guarantee, but Ladd's Marina was very, very generous and looking the other way. This is a torch that you get from Home Depot that burns weeds. And with that and this cast iron thing, I managed to get all of my lead reduced to this right here. And so I had a few pieces that would fit better in the very bottom, so I didn't melt those. And I actually had some extra lead from our family ranch and completed out to compensate for all the concrete that came out. So notice that the lead now fits in very tightly. It doesn't have the concrete, which is much lighter. And I did not want to repeat the problem of having the libra holes blocked. So you can see that I actually put 1/4-inch marine plywood on all sides of the keel, and then put all the lead in, and then it's wedged in with cedar wedges. And then after it's wedged in, we had a plywood cover over the top of it. And then these are the floorboards. And I don't know if you noticed before, but these floorboards are continuous all the way aft to the just forward of the main mast, all the way forward. And I couldn't get these out because the foremast was in. So I actually cut all of these floors. I just cut this step right through the middle there, and to take the two halves out. Well, then I reassembled them. I had to get new wood for these parts like this. And then when I went to put it in, I just cut it this way and then put one piece in and the aft piece in. There it is. And then it did not have latches on these hatches, and so I installed those. And just for interest's sake, you notice this wood here is real light. That's because I found some hardwood that had been made out of pallets, and I thought that it would take some varnish would make it turn dark, but it didn't. So now I've got this wonderful, interesting patina of jigsaw puzzles, and all the patches that I put in. This was where the original diesel stove was, Dickinson diesel stove, and so those are patching holes that came into that. Here's a patch for a pump there. The Lads Marina they were taking boats apart. And so I think I have about 7 different boat parts in this, from things I scrounged for various fittings and those kinds of things. This is what clergy do when they do projects of this size and don't have huge amounts of money to do it. So here's about this time I got the Beta Marine 25 horsepower. On reflection, I probably should have gone with a slightly larger engine, but this certainly pushes us around. This engine is about 240 pounds, I think. That Saab I showed you was 400. And that was a little bit of a goat rope getting it in, because it had to come in the aft cabin, aft hatch, because the main mast is in the way of the fore one. So here's just rebuilding inside. You can see that, and just go through there, and it looks, of course, a lot better. All this varnishing, most of the varnish on the boat is actually not varnish, but it's Tonkinois. I don't know if anybody else is familiar with that, but I recommend it works very good for the interior finish, particularly on the floors, because Tonkinois is not slippery when it's put in. It's more like a deck soil, but it's a little more durable. And I've had good luck with that. There's that interior mostly finish, and that's the aft cabin finally all put together. And of course, these are finding wood to replace things that were rotten and or broken. That's all part of the game. This is just an enjoyable little piece here. I couldn't find the piece when I took it out, and I knew I'd finished it. I couldn't find it. So after a whole day of refitting this piece and getting it screwed down, I went home and I found it in the garage. Here's where those tanks were that we cut out. This is on the port side. So these are the 2 berths and the midship berths. So that's just, again, I cut those out and put hatches in there. Now the other problem was where to put the water tanks, and there were the cabinets underneath the galley were these extremely deep cabinets, so you easily lose stuff in. So I decided that was the best place to put water tanks. And I didn't want the water tanks integral with the boat because I wanted to keep any corrosion out. So I made these plywood boxes, and they fit in, and that's, anybody knows about boats, you got all these crazy angles to figure out. And then I treated the inside of those just like a boat. That's all been put in with epoxy, and then fiberglass cloth, and then all epoxied, and the top is the same way. You can see I got inspection hatches now and stuff, and so those came together and went in. Now that's an experiment. I read about people making water tanks out of plywood and epoxy. I do not know how long they will last. So far they've lasted, but you also notice that these are literally built into the whole cabinetry. The water tank that's part of the water tank back here. This is part of the top of it. That was not in the boat when I got it, that drawer, and he actually apparently taken it out and put in a microwave in there. I fixed that. That's one of those little stories about building that people are excited about sharing. And this bulkhead was about 4 inches this way from where it is now. But this had been a ice box, and I wanted to move the stove over here. And my only option for a stove was an alcohol stove. There was really no good place to put fuel tank, propane tanks. So I had to move this bulkhead to fit the stove in. After I moved the bulkhead, and all this time I was thinking about where I was going to keep alcohol, I just looked at that and then went and got 3 gallon cans that, paint thinner comes in, and they exactly fit across this way, 2 deep. So I can put 6 gallons of alcohol back here, and that was just total serendipity. And I also had to fit this around the water tanks, and that's another whole story. The top of the water tank, by the way, is an inspection back behind this little shelf here, and that's where you can't inspect the tank. There's a little shelf that fits over this. You'll see that later. And then again, the solution for the head was to put a composting head in, and I can verify for the benefit of these, although I changed this one out to a C head, which I think is a little more practical. Mostly because you don't have to take the whole thing out to dump it. You just literally take the bucket out. And that's just a place here. Open this up, and there's the water tank is up there. That becomes a storage for towels and things. There's a door that goes on here. And we had it on for the first couple of years. And then when I refitted the boat in 2017, I took the door off, put a curtain on there. Okay, here's the boat ready to go launch, and you'll notice the prop on this is a perfect pitch, 16-12. Turned out that's a little bit over propped, and we switched it out. Also, bottom paint. I don't know if anybody else, if I was going in for one season at a time, like many of you do on the East Coast, I think this bottom paint would probably be okay. But it's a water-based paint, supposed to be very ecologically friendly. It just doesn't work very well. So at least for California. So there's the getting ready to launch right there. This is 18 months later. So this is 18 months after I pulled it out with the water in the bilge. Notice no sails on it. I still didn't have a fore or a usable staysail. This is the first day in at Stockton Sailing Club. Notice my anchor winch here. This is just, you put a bar in here and you just crank that up. It works pretty good, although I pull it up by hand mostly. At my age, I'm beginning to question whether that's a real smart idea, but I can't figure out any other way to do it at this point. Also, these anchors. This is, I can't remember which one's which, but these fisherman anchors, one's 100-pound, one's 75. I did trade one of these to another bigger boat, and he was doing cushions, so he made cushions for me. And I can't remember what happened to the other, but I now have a Mantis and a couple other different anchors. That's just aft there. This is again a rather unique feature of this boat, is these ways to get in. So there's actually doors and going down below. Okay, this is the galley you saw before. It's a new drawer for it, and then the tile, and that's all set up. And of course, once the boat's in this shape, then you can invite your daughter and granddaughter over. That's one of 5 of our kids and 6 grandchildren. We took her sailing on the bay, San Francisco Bay, about a year after this. And she decided that it was perfect to run down, go underneath the hatch, run up the forward hatch, come back up. She must have done that 25 times. I think she ran further than we sailed that day. Okay, I have a dinghy, and you saw the dinghy on the back of the boat. All the stuff was all rotten. I think he must have done part of this boat, redid this in Mexico, because this part here, which was just flush up here, was his flotation in there was old soda bottles and things that had just been put in there for flotation. So anyway, this is a fiberglass hull, but all the other parts are wood. So this is after I redid it in the garage, and there it is in the water. These are just some pictures of the inside. This is that you didn't see this before. That's the cabinet over top of the galley, and you can see back here the little shelf that fits there that you can put stuff on, and then it lifts up so the top of the stove can lift up. And that's the part of the boat there. There's the head with the vent in it that wasn't in there before. This is just forward. That's the seating, and notice the table here. I have never seen this in any other boat. That is the clamp that holds the table. That's clamped to the foremast. So you can loosen these bolts and move it up and down if you want to. It's not super easy, but it's just an unusual arrangement. This is another one of my little innovations. Hopefully we'll mention some of these innovations and things I learned. The boat had 2 tanks, both up underneath the deck, so because it was a gravity feed to the Saab diesel. When I put the beta in, I needed a fuel return because the pressurized rail system. I didn't have any way to have a fuel return to those 2 tanks. So my solution was to put a test tank. This is advertised a 7-gallon test tank. It's 1 foot by 1 foot, and so the way I know how much fuel I have is I fill the tanks up, 2 20-gallon tanks, and then when I use the tanks, I keep a log of it, and as I fill this up and use fuel out of it. The problem with that is I never seemed to be using as much fuel as I said I was, and I finally sometime actually did some math, figured out that this tank is not exactly 1 foot square. When you consider it's actually a little bit smaller than 1 foot, and then when you consider the thickness of the plastic, it turns out it's only held about 6.5 gallons, not 7. So I had to remark this, and now I have a little better accurate range. This is another solution here because this is just a automotive fuel pump, and it's connected through with valves to either the 2 tanks, which then pumps it up into the day tank. Not super fast, but it works just fine. And I also can, this one right here is I can actually take fuel out of the tanks into another container if I want to. And there's a way to actually blow air through those lines to get crud out if it gets in the tank. That was a big problem on my first trip to Mexico, was getting junk in the coming out of the tanks. That had not ever been cleaned, I don't think, but I've changed enough filters and now it's pretty clean. This is just the aft, again, looking forward from the aft cabin. This is the cover for the shaft and where I can get at the bearing and thing. And then 2 lockers on either side. This locker over here now was a hanging locker. Now it has the inverter, inverter charger, and some storage in there. And this locker over here actually has the 4 batteries. And so we don't really have a hanging locker and all the other instruments. And I have a solar panel. You can see that's light on there. Okay, this is just after this first schooner race, we decided that we were the paint wasn't working well. And so I replaced the bottom paint. This is the copper epoxy that you can get that is epoxy paint. You put a barrier coat on, additional barrier coats, and you put the straight on in 4 coats, and then you sand it, slightly sand it to get expose the copper. It's approved in California, which a lot of copper bases are not approved here. And then you'll notice I swapped the prop out for a folding prop. I think it's called a Streamline or something like that out of Australia. It's a stainless steel, not bronze. The boat does not have very much in the way of zincs on it. There's one forward, there's one right here, and there's one on the shaft. But I haven't noticed any problems with corrosion. This is the first time at the schooner race in San Francisco. First time I had all the sails up. I was struggling all the time with travelers, and that first very picture that Paul had up there, that picture was taken just after my traveler I built, but with oak and a bronze rod, blew up on that. And so that was exciting. And I've lost only a few other blocks and things in this, but and notice it's also got a boom on the staysail. That's gone, and these are all standard pull-up. The only winches on this boat when I got it was 1 winch on the binnacle, and 1 winch on the main for reefing. Other than that, there were none, and so that we changed that when I re-rigged things in 17. And that's just another picture of us getting started in that race. Okay, now we're getting to good ideas and bad ideas. this is a, you know, two-handed, most of you have seen that, and I found that on eBay or someplace, because the controls were completely different for the Saab and the controllable pitch prop, which, by the way, anybody has a controllable pitch prop, they're wonderful. I could not figure out how to mate the beta to the controllable pitch prop, so I took all that out. This never worked right. It never worked right. And every time I'd put it in gear, they would rev up. And so I had to handle with two. So in 17, I replaced that with a regular single lever. And that's worked far, far better. Originally, there was a huge compass here out of a Liberty ship. I tried to see if I could get it fixed. I could not find anybody who would work on it in the Bay Area. So the solution was I put this tap on. You see these screws, I can take this off and access the whole area down here. That's the compass. Behind that's the engine controls, the engine gauges and stuff for the marine. That's worked out very well for me. And I put the GPS here, then I put a autopilot down here, a CPT autopilot. That's been really good. It really doesn't interfere with anything. The steering on this actually goes to a hydraulic. There's a manual hydraulic pump inside the binnacle that the wheel runs, and that runs the piston, which runs the rudder. And that's worked almost seamlessly. There was one time off San Diego coming back in rough weather that I must have got an air bubble in, and no matter what I turned, it could not control the boat. And after talking to the Coast Guard and a few other people, we finally figured it out and got it back working and continued our trip. Again, here's the stove. This has been, I took this stove out and I have just the top part of it here, actually a separate one. You know, they stopped making these, and I think it's a real shame. But anyway, I have one of these sitting in my storage unit right now. But I replaced this with a drawer below here and then storage underneath. That concentrated most of the galley stuff on this side, which made the boat far more usable and livable. This is my own homemade little cooker here hanging on the wall that's gimbaled. And this is a really handy third burner, and also real rough weather. It's good to cook soup and stuff. The other good idea that I had, which is evolved over time, is all these lights. These are all LED, you know, on-off lights that you just put batteries in. And I've now since replaced these with a different variety, which lasts longer and you recharge them. You don't have to replace the batteries. So that's been I now have, there's only 3 wired lights in the boat, one forward by the, in the forward, one in the head, and one in the aft cabin. All the rest of them are these little stick-on lights, and those have worked really well. I never put any of the kerosene lights back on board. I've got a whole bunch of them if anybody needs any kerosene lamps. And this door is one, see how this door comes close to the stove? When we just took that off, it just opened it up. It made it a little more convenient there too. This is another one of my great ideas. I got this idea from where we were in Fifth Avenue Marine in Oakland for a couple of years. There was another schooner there, Colvin Schooner, and he had these hoops on. And so he said, oh, this is a great idea. And so he gave me, I don't know, several foot section of 8-inch PVC pipe. And you can see that you just cut off 1 inch or 1 inch this way. And then you cut out sections here, and then these screw on. And when you actually get them on, you put some thread lock on there so they won't come loose. The advantage of these are that you can take them on and off the mast. These are springy enough that you can actually open them up and stick them right around the mast, and they work very well. And this is a little radical. I was tying these on with twine, and that worked fine. And then I had the brilliant idea that since I was taking the sails off and putting them on in Mexico every season, that I could use zip ties. So actually the last couple of times I've sailed, I just use zip ties to put these on. You put 2 zip ties this way, and then you put 2 zip ties through those onto the sail. So that's another idea. Okay, there's all the hoops ready to go on the boat. And then in 2017, when I pulled out at Port San Luis, the insurance company had been giving me grief for several years about my rigging, which was the original galvanized rigging, which had all been parceled and served. But but they just thought the rigging was too old. I'd already replaced my headstays a couple of times that were rusty. And so the solution was to go with Dyneema rigging. And so this is 1/4-inch Dyneema, but because I wanted the boat to look like it was before, I then parceled and served, you know, several hundred feet of Dyneema. And then getting ready, and this is just tarred nylon line. I can't remember what number it is right now. And then this is your regular tool to do that, and that works great. So that was some winter days in the porch and on the shop putting that together. Then of course I could have spliced them and then parceled and served them. I did that with the triadic stay. I did splice that and put the hoops in like that, and then parceled over top of the splice. But for the main shrouds, I just did exactly what had been done before by using seasons, and that's worked really well. And then this is the end, which is going to go around the mast. This is one of the four the shrouds on the foremast. When I was down at Port San Luis getting ready to put this together, these two guys came up to the boat and they introduced themselves as Brian and John, and I'm talking to them and explaining what I'm doing. And finally I looked at him and I said, "You look familiar to me." Well, it's Brian Toss, who's passed away a few months ago, and John Franta, which was Collegio Marine here in Grover Beach. So after I told him what I did and had done this parcel and served this stuff, John said, "Well, you pre-stretched it, right?" And I looked at him and says, "No." And he said, "Well, we always pre-stretch our Dyneema lines with about, I don't know, 15,000 pounds or something tension to pre-stretch them." And so I hadn't done that and already parceled and served him. What I figured was that I had, by parceling it and then, well, serving it, really, you actually squeeze all the fibers together, and then squeezing the fibers together, I noticed, and I had to tighten my purchase up as I got partway way down. So I think I actually stretched the line by putting the seasons on the servings on the line. These I did take up probably about 1.5 inches on the fore shrouds, and maybe a little more than that on the main shrouds. But at this point, for the last 1.5 years, I haven't had any more stretching in them, so that seems to be holding up pretty well. I didn't have a refrigerator in the boat because I'd taken that ice box out. I had a cooler, an angle cooler, which I had put someplace in the boat, sort of always in the way, for the first trip to Mexico and back in 2015. So I had a brainstorm in the middle of the night that this compartment was just wide enough to slide that angle into. So I cut this out and I brought the angle down, and the angle was 1/4 inch too large to go in there. And none of this has any give to it, obviously. So the solution was to build a refrigerator, and it's stuck in there. I actually got plywood and made a box the size that would fit in here, and put 2 inches of hard foam on all around it, and then fiberglass the whole inside. And so that's actually worked real well. I made it in such a way that this is the water tank, by the way, that's the inspection port. I put the compressor on the back of the box, so that if I ever need to replace it or remove it or repair it, put these pieces that are on the air just screwed in, I can take those off and slide the whole thing out for repair. I haven't had to do it. It runs off my one solar panel and it works great. So, okay, the other really good thing that I did was this, by the way, is the state of my Genoa in the second schooner race that I was in down San Diego. He said, "Oh, it's going to be light winds today," and so I put my lightweight Genoa up, and you can see what happened when the winds picked up. That's why it's luffing there. I'm trying to keep it from exploding on me. So I decided, and then if you notice that the fore is loose-footed. The guy who originally made my foresail and made the original staysail, which is this one right here, had not ever made a gaff before. And so he cut it way too flat. I had indicated that it was supposed to be a storm sail, because that is sort of the storm sail on the schooner. But it never really drew very well. So anyway, so this is over here. You see that I now have a different staysail on there, which is on a roller furling. And then I have a new Genoa, which is roller reefing. And then the new 4 has a much better shape. I actually can sail a little bit better upwind, which I couldn't before. And if you notice the pictures of the boat, real shallow keel, it doesn't have much in the way of grip in the water. And every time I sail any place, at least in the Sea of Cortez, the wind is always the wrong direction. So that was a really big improvement for handling the boat. And I can furl both jibs at the wheel, so I can single handle the boat, so the wife can sleep. Okay, here just this is some schooner porn for all of you. This is some of the pictures from the San Francisco or the San Diego America schooner rough. This is the California, and notice gaff rig, how big it is. This is the other class of schooners that I don't sail, and I sail in this class of schooners here. And then there's the America. That's also a big boat. And this boat is not in the same class. But you can see that why I have a perfect record of being last. All these big guys want to run over me. So this is, by the way, this guy single-handled this boat. He didn't have the fisherman stuff. He single-handed down from Long Beach down to the schooner race. Great guy. Okay, there's another great idea. Is this this is called a electric paddle, and it's made up in Oregon. They're cheaper than torpedoes. They seem to last just as well, give it about as much power. The propeller, the prop on this little motor is like a great big airplane propeller, like a model airplane propeller, but it works really well. And that's been a big addition. My wife has not been much of a sailor until recently. She never really was comfortable rowing, so this gave her the opportunity to go out on her own with the dinghy and do exploring while I did the usual maintenance on the boat. This is my other great idea. I love the other dinghy, and it's a beautiful dinghy, but it's not as we get older, we like things more stable. This is a Portland Pudgy, and this has been a really nice addition to the boat. It's also easier to pull up because I got different pulleys for it, and that worked really well. And it also tows superbly well. So if I'm just going from one anchorage to another, I don't bother to pull the boat up. I just tow it. And notice that that little thing to my father, whose first name is actually Kempton, but his dad, well, he had 3 other siblings. He had a brother and 2 daughters and 2 sisters. And my grandfather was the city public defender for Los Angeles, but he also was notorious drunk. He never called them by his name. My grandmother named him Lincoln, Ruth, Virginia, and Kempton. And my grandfather called him Pete, Bud, and Skinny and Fatty. So anyway, you can see that was maybe a slightly dysfunctional family, and it helps explain my history. So so Pete, Pepe is sort of a short for Pete. So that's how that got there. And this picture here is just to show you what you look like after you've been at sea for too long. And then this is how to keep my wife happy and involved in the boat, is put her up the mast to slush down the rigging. And this wouldn't be a complete talk if I didn't show there's the mast hoops in play there. This is sailing on our second time down to Mexico, which would have been 18. And then this, obviously, wing and wing. And that fits us. And notice I've got the fisherman up there flying, and I can scandalize that a little bit to get it drawing in the right conditions, and that works pretty well. And here's my forlorn boat in Guaymas, Mexico, waiting for us to get back. This is actually a picture taken before I went back down in June and took the Genoa off and the food out of the boat so that it wouldn't rot down there. So I'm open for questions. I think that's my last slide. Okay, I got some questions I can see in the chat list there. The question was about the little outboard. It's called Electric Paddle, and they're out of Oregon, Corvallis or someplace like that. And they were very, very supportive of me. Actually, it broke the first time we had down in Mexico, and they just replaced the whole lower part of it for free because one of the casings broke on it. So anyway, the electric paddle again is a really good group of people, and it's about half the price of a Torpedo, so it seems to be a good option. Tar to seal where the cement was. I'm not 100% sure what that is. Because the concrete was actually holding the ballast in, and the corrosion in the aluminum was underneath the concrete. I had to take the concrete out, and then it just seemed more to weld up all the holes and then coat it with epoxy and stuff. It just seemed to be obvious solution. And let's see.
Okay, everybody should be able to unmute now.
All right, can you hear me?
Yeah, and the PVC has Schedule 80. It's a 1/4 inch thick, that PVC 8-inch pipe, and that really worked well.
Sorry about the mishap. Sorry about the mishap there, folks, but everybody should be able to unmute now.
Can you hear us?
You
Yeah.
can.
Oh, yeah, good. Okay. It was good to see that you were at LADS. We've hauled out there twice with Alan and Patty in 2013 and again this fall. So they're great people. With our schooner, we've been there.
Yeah, Alan, Pat, we're wonderful. Which schooner was yours?
Schooner Maudie.
Maudie, okay. And you're normally in San Francisco?
No, well, we're normally on the West Coast and we're in San Francisco now, yes.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, Alan and Patty have sold the marina and finally retired. Alan was in his 80s trying to figure out how to retire. And yeah, Alan and Patty are wonderful people.
Yeah. Yep. Well, they're still involved. It's a wonderful place.
Yeah. And it's one of the few places I know where you really can do your own work. And they even would shut the yard down at 5, but I was still working, particularly in the summer. And they just expected me to go over and turn the air compressor back on and get back to work. And I would work till 7:38 and go back and shut everything back down again. They were just really, really great.
That's wonderful. And so you came in and out of Port San Luis, and you hauled out there. I've heard that it's difficult to do that because of the tide and the depth controls.
I missed the schooner race in San Diego in 17 because I was hauled out there, and I was trying to get I was all ready to launch, and they wouldn't launch me. And I had to shame them into launching me because they just being chicken about it, because it's a sort of an open roadstead, so there's a surge in there. But when and I also flummoxed them because the way I had to back into their slip, and so needless to say, with an offset prop, it's like a fun experiment to back in. So when I hauled out, I actually had to make 3 approaches, not because I wasn't there, because they weren't ready to handle me. But they were pretty good there. Oh,
hi. Go ahead, Fred.
Hello, hello, Mark. Can you hear me?
Sure can, Fred.
Fred Bowers here. Yeah. Hey, really great presentation. I'm fascinated. I built a Tom Colvin yin yang pinky schooner, and and I'm having the same issue with water in the aft of the chain locker. And I don't want to have it get so bad as to have the problem that you had. I'm thinking about putting another bilge pump in that forward space, see if that solves the problem. So I'm really happy to see. Well, I'm not happy, but I'm interested to see what happened in your boat and how you dealt with it.
Right, because the chain locker now is forward, and I cleared out those limber holes, so now water can flow under, in all the way back to the sump. It's always dry in the chain locker now. So.
Yeah. I didn't. I relied more on the what they call the bearding line to permit the water to run aft, and it's not quite doing it. So I think I have to put a separate bilge pump in to handle that problem in the
Right.
forward space. But, by the way, I used when I bedded my lead ingots, I used something called no shrink grout, which a concrete man put me onto, and it's very tight and does not allow water to infiltrate under the concrete. It's worked out pretty well.
Oh, okay. And I know somebody asked a question about, Brenda asked about ducks, which is I think ducks is a kind of it's a type of Dyneema, right? Or is it not? And I just found the 1/4-inch Dyneema. 1/4-inch Dyneema, the 8 strand that I have or 12 strand is basically the same breaking strength as stainless steel 1/4-inch. That's why I used it.
Oh.
And somebody asked about the refrigeration.
Yeah, I was also interested that. Yeah, I was also interested that your insurance company had trouble with galvanized rigging. I've had no trouble with mine, and I slush it down every year, and it's in perfect shape. I wire spliced the ends on it, and then parceled and served, and it seems to be perfect. So I hope my insurance people don't gig me on that.
Well, it was boat US, and when I first went to Mexico, they were insisting that I have a surveyor survey it, and we were supposed to leave in 2 days to go to Mexico. So I just said, well, tough, I'm going to go to Mexico anyway. So I went to Mexico. I had Mexico liability insurance, but they were just, and then I had it surveyed again in, I think, 16 or 17. That's when they started giving me a bad time about the age of it. I tried to explain to them and give them an history education that the rigging in the Coast Guard and the Eagle is like how many years old, and that's all galvanized, parcel spliced. But.
Sure. Yeah. Good. Thank you.
And then to answer the question about the refrigeration and the solar, again, my box is just a plywood box. It's with foam inside, then fiberglass inside, and it's about 1.1 or 1.2 cubic feet. It's not a really big one. And then it's just I got it through one of the Marines, the Fender or something, the portable refrigeration unit that I just attached to the back of the box. So the sides of the box, I think, are 1/4-inch, and the back is 1/2-inch plywood, so that I could have something to have that all hook onto. You just drill a hole through and run the line in, and it all hooked up real well, and it's worked great. Don't have a freezer though. And it's all run off a 130 watt panel, 130 watt panel. It's on my davits, half davits. And I noticed that Gerardus had the thing about lots of insurance companies only know stainless, and that's exactly correct. I think this is old information. Anybody else use zip ties to put their hoops on their mast in?
There's a new tie that's used for tarps in restaurants for outdoor eating.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, it's the type of tie. I've looked at it in West Marine, and unfortunately, I need too many of them and figure it's not worth it.
Yeah, well, the zip ties are cheap. You buy 100 of them,
Yeah.
and they just go on. You just put them on. I just trim them off close and put 2 on the hoop, and then 2 on the sail that goes through those. And so then when I'm ready to take the sail off, I just cut them off, throw them away, and that's been a much easier thing than lashing them on.
Yeah, they don't rot in the sun.
Well, I'm down for no more than 6 months at a time. Obviously, I'm not down there now. So it does. They don't seem to deteriorate. If I left them out for a couple of years, I think they might. But
Yeah, they will.
I think the black ones are supposed to be better in the
right,
ultraviolet.
yeah. And they actually do make ultraviolet ones that are good for ultraviolet. They're a little more expensive, but not that much.
Really?
They would be stabilized.
That's good to know.
How much more lead did you add than concrete weight-wise?
That was a very poor calculation on my part. There's times when I don't have sail up that I think I'm under ballast. There was one time off Ensenada and a good blow that I was rolling 30 degrees each side. So I was rolling through over 60 degrees. And that is a little disturbing. And then going into La Paz this last time, we had a blow that came up. So what I did was I had maybe 200-pound bars that I added in that had been originally for anchors to hook on a road to go down an anchor. I added those forward, and then I found another probably 200, 300 pounds of lead that I put aft in a compartment. So that's how I figured that was probably compensating for the amount of concrete that was between all the lead bars there. But that's not a very good calculation. So I think I have about close to 4,000 pounds of lead.
Okay.
18,000 pound boat. But the stability of the boat, I mean, it rolls badly, but when I'm actually under sail, if I start putting the rail under, I've got way too much sail up. You don't go any faster. So I almost never sail. Like I had that stove on gimbals. I never used the gimbals because I just locked the stove. We don't have it on gimbal now.
And then you did not mention your water tank capacity. How large
yeah.
is-
Yeah, the two integral tanks were 50 gallons each, so it was 100 gallons. And the two water tanks are about 35 each, so it's 70 gallons. And I can't fill them up right completely full because if I do, when I start heeling in motion, I'll start splashing water out somewhere. So the first time I found water in a bilge, I was like paranoid. And then I found it was fresh water. I realized it was out of my own water tanks. So I normally put about 30 gallons in each one. And then I carry another probably 15 gallons and just gallon jugs stuck here and there. We sailed with 3 of us on the boat going down on the Haha. I think we still had more than 30 gallons when we got to Mexico. So down at La Paz. We also stink on the way down, though. You know, salt water is what we wash with. Real sailors wash in salt water.
Hey, real sailors don't wash.
Yeah, oh, that's true.
That was considered quite an innovation.
And having had Greg sail with me a few times, I can vouch for that.
Yeah, we sailed the Eagle up around in 66 around to, or 65, around through Panama, and the first time was on the West Coast. Of course, once you get out of LA, we sailed from LA straight up to Seattle. I don't think anybody took a bath that 2.5 weeks because the water coming out of the cold showers, they wouldn't let you use fresh water. It was about, 55 or 60 degrees, and people decided, so everybody was happy when we hooked up the shore power, they got real water.
Where's your next trip going to be?
Well, if we ever get out of this COVID stuff, we'll be sailing more in the Sea of Cortez. The next time we have a decent break, I unfortunately took over a parish, so I'm watching after a little parish right now. But the next trip is to go sail back down further south in Mexico, down to Mazatlan, or not Mazatlan, but down to Banderas Bay, stuff like that, and then come back. We found that in the wintertime up in the Sea of Cortez, it's actually pretty cold. When we were down last December, it actually rained quite a bit which was unusual. Everybody in Mexico, when you say, isn't it colder or raining? They say, oh, never like this before. Well, obviously it is. So I think all the rain, then the tropical forest may be moving north, and the desert's moving further north too.
Where are you now?
It's in Guaymas, Mexico. The boat's there.
Okay. No, I mean, and you personally, where's your parish?
Oh, in Cambria, right near Hearst Castle. Or yeah, that's the town next to Hearst.
Yeah, so you could be anchored in San Simeon.
I could be anchored in San Simeon. Yeah, we kept the boat for a while in Morro Bay, and Morro Bay is a sort of a neat place, but it's not a great place to have a schooner to go sailing, because you sail out of the harbor and you're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and San Francisco is, of course, much nicer. Sea of Cortez is a lot of nice places to go. And we kept it in Oxnard for a while too, and that's the better sailing out of there in the Channel Islands, which is where I grew up and started sailing. I've had obviously, the Coast Guard Academy had the benefit of sailing up and down the coast on the Telegram and go through the Cape Cod Canal and in New Bedford. And just to give you one little story, in New Bedford in 1966 or something, we were there for Easter. And this was long enough ago where there was nothing open in Easter. So we had a bunch of cadets on a boat with nothing to do. And the only place we found open was a 10-pin bowling alley owned by a Jewish guy. And he was real happy to have us come in and bowl 10-pin bowling and eat with him. So that was a fun time. Candlestick, whatever it is.
Any other questions, or are we for Mark? Are we done at this point? Just another moment. Just want to share my screen 1 second again. All right, so hopefully you're seeing my screen, which is speaking briefly about the next month's seminar. But I think you might actually be seeing my PowerPoint screen. So it's not quite sure what you're seeing at this point. But are you seeing something that resembles Third Time Ashore on Schooner Adventure?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Our next speaker is actually Bill Carden. So Bill, do you want to give a 30-second preview of next month?
Sure. I've sailed with Mark Falstick for on and off for 22 years. It's sad Mark passed away last year. But in 2015, Mark, every year, Mark tried to do the Gloucester Schooner Festival. I think his boat has done the Schooner Festival the most out of all the schooners. If you look online, you can actually count all the years Mark. And he's a very competitive sailor, excellent captain. And I got the pleasure of sailing on, it's a 1926 Malabar 6 schooner. I was with them in 2013, 2014. We had engine trouble the first year. 2014, we just got socked into Cape May for 4 days. And it was, we lost our window to get to Gloucester. So 2015 is the Adventures on Adventurer, from Gloucester to the Fisherman's Cup to Provincetown to New London, and then the Great Chesapeake Bay Schooner Race. So it's again, a very competitive boat, and she's a beauty. And that's, I'll show some great pictures. And it was the first year that Schooner Columbia came to Gloucester. So we got some great videos of competing against Colombia.
Thanks, Bill. So that will be our third webinar, which again is about a month from now. Mark, again, thank you very much for your jumping in on
And,
this.
and Paul, Gerardus asked me a couple of questions, and he didn't get them answered.
Oh.
And the one was what it cost to haul out in Guaymas at the state place there. It's about $150 in and out, and I just paid 7 months storage, and it was $700. So it's or 6 months storage for $700. So it's obviously less expensive. I was paying $700 a month for a slip in Oxnard. And then he asked if how my ballast is secured on top, and the ballast is wedged in, and then there's actually a plywood top on top of that's not screwed into the metal, but it would, and then the hatches are also secured. So if the boat ever inverted, I don't think I'd lose my ballast. And then the last question was, let's see, Gerardus, is there something else I need to? I think that was it. Okay.
Again, I'm sorry. I apologize for anybody who wasn't able to unmute. You should have been able to, so I'm going to have to look in to see why you were not able to. So we may just have to just leave everybody unmuted from the very beginning, because we've had problems both last month and this month getting people unmuted. My apologies.
Yeah, and as a presenter, I would have liked to have people laugh once in a while.
At the right times, of course.
At the right time, yes. Yeah.
All right. Any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, everybody, and hopefully we'll see you next month.
Okay.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.